going fast. You lost that sense of solitude and freedom. That's what it used to be like in the time of the Buddha. I'm very fortunate as a monk that I've tasted that and know what it meant. But always when it came to the evening time, or really the mid-afternoon, you would always look for a river, a small pond, some sort of body of water, even a well, because walking all day, your little flask of water would be empty. You need to refill it. You'd want to wash because it's always dusty and dirty, even in the jungles. Actually, in the jungles, it's wonderful. There's always some flower was in flower. It was always fragrant. Every time of the year, the forest was fragrant. These are the real rainforest jungles. It's a beautiful thing to experience. But in the evening, you look for a body of water, and you'd fill up your flask. You bathe to take the dust of the day off your body, and you probably wash a couple of robes as well. And having filled up your flask, you'd sit under your mosquito net, usually about 10 or 20 meters away from the edge of the water, because in the evening the animals would come out to do exactly the same which you were doing. They'd drink and they'd wash their body, though they wouldn't wash their clothes. They didn't have any robes. But apart from that, they were the same. So Ajahn Chah, who lived that lifestyle for many, many years, told the story that sometimes he would actually sit under his mosquito net after having bathed, filled his water flask, and instead of closing his eyes and meditating, he would keep them open, just to watch the jungle animals when they came out of the evening. It was just like those nature films which you see. These were wild animals, not pets. They'd come out in the evening to drink. But if they sensed there was somebody there watching, especially a human being, they would think it was a hunter. It would be so dangerous for them that if they sensed there was a human being, they'd run away. So he said the only way he could watch those animals was to be absolutely still, not to move. If he moved, they'd sense him, and they would turn around and go back in the forest. Even if they were thirsty, they wouldn't risk their lives if they knew a human being was around. He said it was not that hard to keep still because he was a meditator. Because he was still, these animals would come out, they would drink, they would play, and it was just so delightful to see animals in the wild play around. They're just like human beings. They're naughty. They're mischievous. I remember once seeing this group of birds come out to drink. And they all, it's amazing that this was while they all stood in line, just like a queue at a bank or something. First come into the front, next come in the next, all in the queue. And then the first one would bathe, they'd drink, flap its wings as the birds do. And then there was one really naughty bird jumped the queue. And all the other birds descended on it and basically beat it up and pecked it off. Just like human beings. And that's why when you see nature in the wild, it's just so much fun. It's delightful. It's better than watching the TV. So Ajahn Chah would do that in the evening, just watch his animals play and become mischievous. But he had to be absolutely quiet to watch them. But he said sometimes, once the ordinary animals had played by the still forest pool, if he was really quiet, some other animals would come out from the jungle. And these were incredibly beautiful animals. Animals he'd never seen before. Beings who even his teachers and his parents never told him existed. They are the most strange and weird and rare animals you could ever imagine. But so beautiful. They were so rare because they were incredibly shy and very sensitive. If they knew there was somebody who was watching, they could sense them so easily. And they'd run back into the forest and never come out again for months. Sometimes he was so still that even these rare and very beautiful animals would not know he was there. and they'd come out and drink by the still forest pool, and he would enjoy their company. They wouldn't know he was there. He said that simile was for the beautiful nimittas. These nimittas, these lights which come up in the mind stands for the still forest pool. Ajahn Chah watching stands for your mindfulness. The animals, so rare, are either the nimittas or the jhanas which come next. Once this nimitta comes out, if it knows you're watching, if you move, that nimitta will go right back in the jungle, will not come out again for days. You've blown it. What happens is people get excited. Wow, look at that! The animal, in this case the nimitta, has heard you, will run away. All of you who've seen a flashing light, it's disappeared immediately. That is what has happened. It's come out to play by your still mind, and it's known you were watching and has gone away. Or sometimes you get afraid. You've never seen anything like that before. It's incredible, it's weird, very powerful. You're afraid. Because of fear, the animal knows you're there, can smell your fear, and will run back into the jungle and never come out again. So understanding that simile, which is so perfect, it's a beautiful simile, you understand what you have to do at this stage in the meditation. You have to be like an Ajahn Chah by the still forest pool. You have to be like one of these wildlife photographers. You have to be like a paparazzi taking a picture of Princess Diana. If you move, her bodyguards, well, she's dead now, but you know what I mean, Madonna or something. Actually, one of my friends, one of the disciples in Perth, he was a paparazzi. And he heard that, what's her name? The Kylie Minogue, that she had some nervous breakdown. He heard she'd gone to Broome in the north of Western Australia. And he told me it's the most exciting time of his life as a photographer, because he crawled through the bushes outside this resort, Cable Beach Resort in Broome. And he saw her, and he got her, and he went all around the world. His photographs earned a fortune. Really mean and nasty, I told him, but he was so excited. But I said, now, if you can only do that with your meditation, you'll be a great meditator. To be able to sneak up on the nimitta without the nimitta knowing you're going to take a photograph. Now that's the sort of mind you have. It's got to be so still, so subtle, so peaceful. And then that nimitta will stay. Why does it move? Another simile, this is my simile. I use the idea like a nimitta is like a reflection of your face. In this case, a reflection of your mind. Imagine you're watching a reflection of yourself in a mirror, right when you're brushing your teeth in the morning. And that reflection is moving backwards and forwards. And you think, the mirror is moving. So you try and hold the mirror to make it still. That will not make the image become still. It's not the mirror's fault. It's the one who is watching's fault. When you're at that stage in the meditation, the one who is watching has to be very, very still. You, the watcher, the knower, has to be motionless. Then what you see, which is a reflection of that knower, the citta, the mind, that is then still. That's how you keep the stillness. You get to this 11th stage of anapanasati. The Buddha said that this is called chittanusati, the reflection of the mind. It fulfills the third satipatthana. What happens next is amazing. That nimitta is just so still. You know you're watching a nimitta. You know that you're watching this beautiful light. It gets brighter and brighter, more and more brilliant. Then one of two things happen. It's exactly the same thing viewed from different perspectives. You fall into that nimitta, or that nimitta envelops you. You get the most incredible bliss. If you have enough stillness, you'll stop with that bliss, sometimes for many hours. Unchanging, incredible bliss. When you ask yourself afterwards, what was I aware of? What was the object of my mindfulness? You'll only be able to say one thing: bliss. There's no breath left anymore, not in front of your perception. You're not conscious of breathing. You're not conscious of your body. You're not even conscious of the nimitta anymore. That has done its job. All you're aware of is bliss. In the sutras, that's called Vivekaja Piti Sukha. The bliss, the Piti Sukha, which is born of the five senses being put down, the body disappearing. When it says the aloofness or the separation, the seclusion, the renunciation, always understand why, what's being renounced, what you've let go of. You've let go fully now of the body and the five senses. At that stage you can't hear any sound, you can't feel the body. If someone kicked you, you would not feel it. If the person sitting next to you snored, you would not hear it. All of these things are gone. I'll tell you tomorrow the insight which comes from that experience when you contemplate it afterwards. Basically you find why that's so blissful. Why that's the most happiness, the most ecstasy you've ever felt so far. It exceeds the bliss of the nimittas many, many fold. Those are two of the factors, the happiness and joy. They're combined together because it's all one mass of bliss, ekaggata. The vitakka vichara, because somebody asked this yesterday. Those two factors are just what I call the wobble in that first jhana. The mind is with that bliss. Actually, what's happening there is still a residue of grasping, of attachment. You're not that confident to fully let go to the max. You hold that bliss. Because you hold it, it's not sustainable. You recede away from the bliss. The bliss starts to break up. And you feel that the attention, the knower, if you like, moves slightly away from the bliss. Instead of being completely absorbed in it, there's some distance between you, the knower, and the bliss. But because it's so powerful, you get drawn right back in there again. Being drawn right back in is called the vitakka. The holding of it is the vichara. It's just a wobble, that's all. It's so close to being one-pointed. It counts as one pointedness of mind. It's one of the great senses of samadhi, unification of mind. In that state, it's incredibly blissful. Because of its stability, you stay in there for a long period of time. If you only stay in there for 1 second, it's not really a jhana. I call it ping-pong jhana. You just go in, you come out again. You might as well call it that if you want, just to encourage you, but it's not really the real thing. If you really get in there, you're in there for a long time. The reason is because it's so stable. Look, if you can watch a movie on the television for a couple of hours because you're having a good time, you can't take your eyes, as it were. This is just a metaphor, there's no seeing. You can't take your eyes off that bliss. You're having such a wonderful time, nothing else matters. My goodness, you can't come out. You don't want to, you're having a great time. So people who get in those jhanas, it's usually 2-3 hours or something, and they're sitting there having the most wonderful time of their life. And they don't care about breakfast anymore, about lunch. Who cares about that? They didn't even care about a talk by Ajahn Brahm. They're just sitting there completely oblivious, having the time of their lives. And good on them. There's a lot of benefit from this afterwards. So in this talk this evening, I'm not focusing on the insight and what this means to your understanding. I'm just focusing on the experience. But just because I'm focusing on the experience, please don't think this is without insight. These huge insights come from these stages. That's why the Buddha became enlightened. He got huge insights from these jhanas. Quite naturally, what happens next? In those states, you can't proceed any further. You can't, but the state can develop by itself. Another thing which is almost gone in this jhana, but which becomes very clear that you've let go of in the next jhana, which is very strange, is your will, your potential to do. The real controller in that first jhana, because there's a touch of grasping onto that bliss, which is the vichara, and there's a moving towards it. Technically speaking, if you're going to be very refined, you are still doing something. Subconsciously, subverbally, there's still a movement there. But when you let go of that movement, just because of confidence, you're confident enough to fully let go with that bliss, so you don't hold on to it anymore. And it stays absolutely immobile. The last bit of doing, of will, of choice, of intention, of aspiration, that which moves you, has now completely gone. You're in such a solid and stable diamond rock-like state where no movement is possible. You are like frozen in bliss. That particular bliss is called samadhija piti sukha, the bliss which comes of absolute stillness. You've let go of something which was so common, always there for you, that it's so strange, it's like nothing you've experienced before. Not just the bliss, but the fact is it's got a taste of one of the most important parts of what you took to be yourself having completely vanished. The potential to do, to be in control, has gone. That is weird. It's a completely different level of consciousness where the doer is no longer there. Vanished completely. It's the first time it's gone. Now you understand what that doer really is. This is the deep state of second jhana. If you are lucky, every one of these jhanas lies within the one before. I used that simile yesterday of the 1,000-petal lotus. The reason I use that simile because it gives a great metaphor, a way to understanding what these jhanas are in. When the Buddha said there's Buddha nature inside of you, this is what it is. Every stage is right within the one you're in now. Those jhanas are right within your consciousness in this very moment. You've just got to get in there to feel them, to know them. They're right in this body. You go into time. Timelessness is in the middle of time. Silence is in the middle of thoughts. The breath is in the middle of your body. The beautiful breath is in the middle of the breath. The nimitta is in the middle of that happiness, which is called the beautiful breath. The jhanas come right in the middle of the nimittas, which is why you either sink right into the middle of the nimitta, or the nimitta goes around you. It's in the middle. In the middle of the first jhana, and right in the center of it is the second jhana. So you don't throw something off and go somewhere else. You just go deeper into where you are now. Deeper into the center. In the middle of that second jhana, you come across the third jhana, where it's another type of happiness altogether, far more refined, which is the pity part, which is the disturbing part of happiness. You get a bliss which is more blissful than the bliss you've had before, which you thought was the maximum you could ever experience. Now, if you really want to find out what ecstasy is, what bliss is, what happiness is, you're now becoming the expert on ecstasy. Sometimes people think they know about happiness. In the world, only great monks, meditators know what happiness is. You think that, falling in love is the greatest thing ever happened to you? Sex, great sex, even drugs. That is nothing. That's not a millionth part of the happiness which you get in these deep meditations. If you really want to know what happiness and pleasure is, you get in these meditations and it'll blow your mind. So, you get into these amazing happinesses. And then another level of happiness comes next with the equanimity, the absolute stillness. And sometimes it's like the happiness has disappeared, but that is an even better happiness. It is the happiness of no happiness. That might sound like a Zen koan to you, but You get that experience, you know exactly what it means.